Okay, back. Let's get started. So before I go on, I wanted to invite you who are in analytics. We have an event coming on Friday, April 28th, and this is the inaugural Analytics Summit. And I've been sharing this since November, and we finally have got the ball rolling. We're on our way, and it is going to be a really great event. Not because I did anything with it, but we have an outstanding list of speakers. So for those of you in analytics, you know it's a broad expanse industry. It covers so many things. It covers health, it covers science, it covers industries of all kinds of makes. And so one of the things that's interesting about analytics is that it doesn't focus on any single industry because basically it touches so many. So my desire in this summit is that we would bring all people or individuals who are interested or inside the analytic field to be able to get together and have this eclectic mix of ideas and thoughts go on, and perhaps rub it with other individuals who you haven't met before and consider other particular thoughts and ideas that may not have come to you before. So it'll be Friday, April 28th. Students, it will be $50 for this for admission. The admission will include continental breakfast. It will include a sandwich lunch, and then it will also be a mixer for those of you over 21, where you get a chance to mingle with the speakers. The power of this is all of the speakers. I don't want to use the word amazing because I consider marketing done the word amazing to death, but they're pretty good. All right. Let me kind of say this. So just to give you an idea of some of the speakers. So Lowe's is going to be the platinum sponsor of us. They're very grateful, and they're bringing to us Kunal Das, who is the vice president of data analytics with Lowe's Corporation. But he's also on the board of directors of the editorial board of CDO magazine. So this is an individual who has himself at the top. We have some unique individuals inside the university, including Rick Sears, who runs IRAP. And you have, it's difficult in inside to know just how important the analytics have helped us to grow this university. And Rick is going to be one of those individuals. My personal favorite of all of these is if I have favorites, but I'm fascinated listening to Matt Hefner, because Matt is not just a individual who's in the environment, energy, and economics part, but he's a mathematician as well, which brings a pretty neat, eclectic thought process. I looked at the code that he's written on his own way, really guy, very ripe thinker. One of my friends, Dr. Dana Harrison, who is the chair and also a teacher at Eastern Tennessee State, she literally not only wrote the book, she wrote 2 books on analytics. And so she's going to be talking about the lifelong education that successful analytics professionals pursue. And to me, the one that I tried my best to get is this person. Brian Dalgetty has been on our boards in 2017, but he's so much more than that. The ChatGPT now is coming 20 years ago. IBM was coming up with something called Watson, and this was a founding member of the team that developed the IBM Watson. This individual has very deep roots in IT. He is, in essence, one of the creators of the thoughts of the Internet of Things, right? So 20 years ago, we were talking about securing and connecting all these things together. this particular gentleman was one of those individuals who's at the forefront. And so you actually have a chance to meet, talk, but not only that, but you'll have a chance during the breaks to talk to any individuals there. We are expecting professionals, we're expecting students, we're expecting academics such as myself, and we're expecting corporations to be there. It's going to be a very, as I said, an eclectic mix, which is what analytics really is. And hopefully those of you who are in it would like to join and be with us. We are also going to have a student competition. So Volvo has graciously ascended to be the sponsor for student competition, which is generally groups between 3 and 4. There's no limit to number of groups that can join. They'll be at an introductory level, those who just started statistics. They're undergraduate level for those that have that as a major. And then it'll be a graduate level for the MSATA students. And then they will present at the very day. The last that if you wish to go, one of the things that I am pushing personally is for academics such as myself and companies to sponsor students. And so I've asked our teachers to step up to the table and sponsor students so that they can go. And so we'll start circulating a list like that as well. Ask the students who will accept this particular scholarship that they do stay all day, of course, really absorb, because that's really the lesson for all of us. So they just send an email blast out with all of the particulars. If you have questions about it, please let me know, and hopefully I'll see you at the summit April 20th. Okay. All right, awesome. So just in case you were wondering why I've been more scatterbrained than usual, that's why. Okay. We are going to not worry about globalization and retail in chapter 6. The answer is no. So you don't have to worry about it. And we're going to move on to wholesale. If we were to look at the structure of channels, usually you look at the manufacturer up here. Look functions. And if we remember originally back in chapter 1, why do we have wholesalers and why do we do that? It's because they perform very important distribution functions, but they have much greater value just beyond this. Wholesalers are vitally important to the success of many organizations, especially capital intensive. I'll explain those reasons later. So the first thing, of course, without further ado, is what's the dictionary definition that we're going to use for the test? And this is it. Now, when I talk about wholesaling, I might use the word distributor. I want you in your own mind, if you see that on the text, to consider them one thing. Originally, distributors had a different concept name than wholesalers, but they've spoken one thing, so you might as well think of it. Wholesalers are independently owned and operated by and sell over which, and this of course key phrase if you're looking for doing your test, which they call ownership. They buy goods which means from the two functions possession it's important to understand because that is the soul of what wholesaling is, because it means that they can set price. They can price those goods depending on their industries and decide whether to have lower prices and have value-added services or to sell those goods particularly later. So in Palmenteur's book, looking at what the modern numbers are. And so this is not, so I want to give you an idea. Wholesale. 17, there were 2,000 companies in the United States. And then I think, well, wholesale. Now, 0.2 trillion. They're 33% of the U.S. GDP. I tried to find the but now, yeah, 62,500,000. Okay. It's obviously a growing industry. The number of corporations are starting to lessen, although it's hard to say, go from 40,000 to 35,000 companies. But there has been a prevailing trend in wholesaling to reduce the number of corporations. But everything that I've seen points to that the number of employees have remained consistent. And so retailing and wholesaling are labor intensive. And although the labor is somewhat, we still see that they're more valuable, right? Wholesalers sell physical inputs and products to other businesses, but even though they're closely aligned to physical goods, I want you to understand the core of wholesaling is service. It is maybe the epitome of what a service industry is, even though they're predominantly dominated by physical products. I'll show you what I'm. So many moons ago in chapter 1, talked about mom and pop convenience stores, God bless you, the wholesalers, and how they solve needs and how their primary focuses are is to be concentrators and be able to the economies of scale. Well, I did a little research, and this is the Atlantic Dominion Distributors, and it's really an interesting organization. I looked up. I have nothing, I mean, in terms of connection with them whatsoever. But this is one of those great American companies out there that have been around for a long time. And so they were established in 1975. They were snacks. They were accommodated by tobacco at the time. But every good organization, when it comes to they redefine beyond just merely tobacco. When Philip Morris, he's 94, to build the apartment. Philip Morris suddenly realized that they better get in a new line of business or they're going to be in trouble. So Philip Morris looked back at himself and said, well, what do we do well? And they said, well, we run organizations well, do distribution pretty well, our marketing is not bad. Philip Morris then bought Nabisco, so it's now RJR Location Wonder and doing quite well. At the very same time, Atlantic Dominion did the same thing. They diversified beyond just merely tobacco, and now they distribute quite a few things. And their corporations, although they do sell tobacco, they do also sell just about everything. So in my first slide, when I talked about individual distributors, the truth is that a mom and pop store only needs. And just think about the advantages of a mom and pop store. I have one location that I can do all my shopping from. And if you're ever looking at the service output of breaking bulk, here's an example. So they're distributing their large locations. This is what's called wet pallet. Right? So talk about pallet. This is a wooden pallet. You call it a skid when they're stacked like. You see the little 2-port thing. This is where the forklift comes in and lifts them all up. But what a mom and pop store can do is instead of buying an entire warehouse, they can buy flat. Just think of the advantages for mom and pop store. Just think about the dollars that warehouse is taking up. It allows every little mom and pop store to be able to compete, not overspend. As I've always said, inventory is the best things you've got to have, and yet you don't want too much inventory. Well, they make their money being convenient. And let me also say this too, as I talk about the epitome of wholesalers and service, they focus on their customers. They focus on the mom and pop stores. And because of that, they provide value in bringing those particular items together. Now, not only do that, once again, you think to yourself, what are my core competencies in distribution and small lots? One of them, they've diversified over the years, and now they offer vending services as well. And so they even do things like micro market kinds of distribution, which is excellent. So it means that reasonably fresh foods can be sent to smaller locations. And they've even done things like dry ice and CO2, which is another neat thing. Once again, their core competency is in distribution to small retail. So, wrap this up, as I've said, is that their heart and soul is being able to service their industry. They thrive on doing what manufacturers can't. And they provide value by providing knowledge to consumers about the proper use of the manufacturer's goods. So as I said, they've been subject to massive decades-long wave of consolidation, industry by industry. But as I've said, the total number of core workers in wholesale is steady, if not growing. And so the consolidation is less about reducing their expenses, killing the number of jobs that they have, of the economies of scale. So what sparked that? Well, it's mostly IT. Efficiency and success in organizations, especially movement of goods, is in the economy. I say that over and over. But it is vital. And so we'll have to discuss later. From C an enormous advantage when it comes to being able to efficiently work. It's one of the major the major push behind consolidation in the wholesale industry, it would be IT. Without it, you wouldn't have material requirement planning, just-in-time manufacturing, all of those dynamics that help to achieve us to create an efficient distribution channel. And it is done much more than that. Now, when we look at additional, surprisingly, what we find is that times the corporation middle manufacturer is also what's known as a master distributor. Master distributors distribute to only distributors. It's a one kind of definition test question. Distributors, especially when it comes to goods that require not only a scale, but enormous capital expenses, sometimes need someone in that middle as well. And so HVAC, heating, ventilation, and so distributors across states actually use a major master distributor to distribute heating and air conditioning units to distributors themselves. This is not common, but it's not usual. In Japan and in other Asian cultures, it's not unusual for this to be 7 steps deep. It's already 5 steps, so it's not far away. And the reason why is that every step along the way adds something about itself, and one that is service and respect. Crowning success of a wholesaler is that they can look at a manufactured item, look at the own industry in which they are in, and say, that's useless for my industry, or that would be good. So, master distributors, I'm not going to talk that much on, but I wanted to make sure that you understand. They perform the same functions as distributors. They consolidate orders from all the manufacturers. Where a distributor might have a minimum order, say to, I'm trying to think of air conditioning specialists, any of them that you might think. Just think of the capital type. Well, a master distributor does the same thing that the distributor does. Consolidate the order, and they can form or have economies of scale. Essential. To needs of distributors do the same thing that distributors do. They have all of the same functions and values, but as I said, they distribute to distributors. Now, we'll step back a little bit, and I want to talk about another distributor So I used to work in the oil field industry when I was in my 20s. I worked for a company in the city called Port Hart, and this was in the where the oil boom started really happening in Louisiana. Sure. We got Port Hardware grew exponentially, especially because one of the things is that Kerr-McGee, Chevron, and Exxon, all the other large organizations needed to get their goods as quick as possible. And I'll explain a little bit later. And so they worked closely with local hardware stores in Morgan City. And so there was Morgan City Hardware, there was Port Hardware, there was 2 or 3 others. And they would come up with an order of needing 100,000 feet of stainless steel tubing. Well, stainless steel tubing in the day was about $20 a square foot, or excuse me, per foot. So a massive cost just for 2,000 feet of stainless steel tubing for a little hardware store was simply impossible to be able to purchase. But through a partnership with Moody Price, we could do it. Moody Price could consolidate all of our orders together, go to major steel manufacturers in the United States, and they would be able only to buy it, but they would warehouse it for us until we need it, which this is actually done at least a decade before just in time started in. But there are other things as well, because Moody Price focused on the oil field industry, both onshore and offshore. What they would do is they would look at corporations or make standard things like Parker, which was making stainless steel fittings, Swedgelock, which was making quick connector couplings that used fire industry. Our corporation also made high pressure fittings, which were very exacting in their standards. It required a certain amount of able to have a certain level of quality in the hoses that there were a lot of things that were beyond just simply taking part off the shelf and selling. And so these individuals became collectors. They, in essence, added the value by looking at goods and understanding them from this particular view. So it meant that fire equipment that was wrong, there was no whether or not even boots and gloves. These engines were engines very in the process of distilling oil, which diesel a lot of pollutants in them. And so their special understanding not made it easier for us to recommend to our particular customers. So they provided more than just the consolidation, but they provide services. So if you look at what they're doing, it's more than just selling goods. The services, these are up to things up to 40,000 PSI. And that requires really specialized, because can you imagine when a 40,000 PSI bus potentially dangerous? And so it requires a certain level of skill that takes time to build up. They would be able to give us that unique knowledge of how to do it correctly. They would do not only repair, but they would do things like help us with inventory control systems and even things like calibration equipment and rentals. So just think about it. I've got to bend 3/8 inch stainless steel tube. Now, the particular piece that is cost is somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000. Now, what if I only need it one day? Because traditionally you're not going to be needing that forever. Well, I could rent that. I could rent whole kits and I would not have to be able to buy in on the whole setup. And that's what they did very well. And the last thing, of course, is training. So if you're going to go offshore, right, you need at least some training. You need to also need to know how the industry. The point, I just need to understand that wholesaling is a story of the industry, and they did quite well at it. And they started out one store in Houma, Louisiana, which was about 52 miles from Portland City. And they're spread across the. Okay. Enough. It's also important to understand that there's more people in the game than just them. Remember when I always said the greater number of players signify efficient channel system. Well, this adds to it by introducing two more players that are participants in supply chains. Anybody ever work with a state agent? No. You did work for one or know someone?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, awesome. So an agent, all right, an agent is an individual represents one side of the transaction. An agent is a very specialized salesperson. They're usually very skilled. They understand their industry pretty well. They have to constantly stay updated on it. And generally, they receive no salary for their work. They receive usually a commission. And that's on the completion after everything else. Agents either make a percentage of the gross or percentage of the net. The top agents usually have a percentage of the net. So it'd be like 15% of whatever the company makes. So if they made cleared $100, they would get. Now, doesn't sound like a nice living trust. Agents as a group, not every one of them, the highest paid individuals in the sales business. They're usually individuals that are cream. It also gives those agents the freedom to choose who they wish to represent as well. So manufacturers agents, I'm going to turn back to the oil field again, don't represent one corporation, they'll represent wedge lock fittings, Wix air filter, Purelator, all of those brands, they'll represent more than one corporation and generally carry their bag around. Maybe I'm thinking 40 years past. They would carry a bag around with all their information. They never took title or delivery of things that they had. That's another thing that an agent does. Agent coordinates those things and then jump on how they make money. As I said, they're probably pretty in what they know. And the truth of the matter is that many wholesalers or manufacturers could not live without it. They're happy to pay those commissions because the commissions mean that somebody generated. Brokers are something different. Brokers tend to be single unique location that brings buyers and sellers together. Brokers tend to be almost like a mediator. And so on one arm, they have buyers and the other they have sellers. And so an example of this, especially in real estate, is of course the continuing deterioration of malls in the United States. That requires a very specialized individual to be able to understand how to take that and turn it into a profit. And so they'll find buyers on one side and they'll find sellers on another, and they'll say, let's make a deal. The mall here in Boone actually does quite well. There's one corporation of brokerage that has been doing its best to keep this little mall alive. And I think a small town like and find people to come into those locations when somebody else. That's another thing that broker. They're licensed by the organization that owns the mall and says, please keep businesses coming in. It's extremely important. And so those are agents and those are brokers. And the last is of what are called third-party logistics. So, pre-PGM, the way they make their money is they charge an activity-based for the services in which they rent. And so they get paid money. It's the first handle system. So to give you an example, so this is an example. There's actually, what is it called? Shipping Wars. There's a show on Discovery Network thing. And Shipping Wars are about hotshotters, but a really unique group. So to go back to my description, sure. The drilling platform and the production platforms offshore are not owned by the corporations, they are rented. So they actually rent an entire platform of drills. Howard Hughes, his family made a fortune not on selling special, but leasing. So it meant that corporations who wanted to drill would not have the capital expense have to build into drilling. They could just simply rent them or lease them. Well, this is what a hotshot truck does. You lease it for its particular needs, and that's it. So going back to these rigs offshore, the rent on these things are from $200,000 a day to $1 million a day. If we're talking about a drilling ship that happens offshore. Now, imagine what would happen if one piece broke down, and it could not be repaired. Just thousands of dollars would be lost every minute, and that's their importance. So hotshot became this way of getting these goods to a helicopter or to a boat as rapidly as it possibly could. But usually it meant going from one location like Morgan City, Intracoastal City, or like Lafayette, and having it shipped to a dock such as Dulac or any of the others. Now, they're pretty confident about speeding tickets. The job is to get it there as fast as possible. And of course, they're concerned about safety, but in the original 40 years ago, it had to get there and had to get there at that moment. It's a 24-hour service. If you call them at 2 a.m., they expect you to pick up the phone, get ready within 10 minutes, be out the door, get the good, and get it down as possible. This is an example. Yeah. Third-party logistics provider that is contracted with a particular thing that is paid by a certain activity, and they did enormously well. They're successful. Just remember this, they also don't take titles, but they provide value in the services that they. All right, break right there, because I've got to go do some more stuff. But we're gonna go today. And I will see you on Wednesday. We will talk about strategies for wholesale, and I'll get